Well, greetings, welcome in. We are so grateful that you chose this opportunity to see our First Grace morning worship celebrations together. We hope that this can be a resource for you in conjunction with belonging to and being known by a local church fellowship. By no means does this substitute that, and we pray that you, wherever you are, would be able to find that. We are so excited about the opportunity to study the scriptures together, and we hope that this can be a resource for you. If you have been blessed by the ministries of First Grace as well, you can give back at www.firstgrace.com/online giving, and we would love to be able to see that investment go forward in ministry. So God bless you, and we hope that you are edified and delight in the scriptures as we study them together today.
Of Jesus Christ here at First Grace. Text GIVE to 937-565-5703, or you can go on firstgrace.com. Those of you who are listening by live stream today or seeing our telecast that airs each week on Dayton Spiritual TV, you can go to firstgrace.com and click on the giving tab and be involved with all of the rest of us in this wonderful opportunity to worship the Lord. If you've got your Bibles today, let's turn to the Gospel of Mark. If you've been here all along, you know that this is a continuing journey for us. We're up to chapter 8 in the Gospel of Mark. Mark chapter 8. Last week we were also in Mark chapter 8, and we are just experiencing some amazing revelation as we see what the overarching title of this message series really means, that we're talking about the Gospel of Mark, and it refers to the suffering servant, who is Jesus, and the reigning king, who is also Jesus. These are two kind of opposite ends of a spectrum as far as the life of Jesus, but we see in the Gospel of Mark how they're so intertwined, that the suffering of Jesus and who he was makes him the reigning king. You see, it's the Apostle Paul who said, "In my time of weakness, I'm strong." When I'm going through suffering, and Jesus said we would go through suffering. He said, "You're going to go through testing and tribulation, but be of good cheer because I've overcome the world." Now, that's good news, at least it ought to be, especially in this crazy world that we're living in right now, and this messed up nation that we're witnessing, on every level, doing all kinds of things that are chaotic, and all kinds of leadership that's taking us down wrong paths. We need to trust the fact that Jesus has never been out of control. We might not be able to trust politicians, but we sure can trust Jesus. So we choose to trust him. He may not bring a political solution. And in this day, as he was walking on the earth during his ministry, he didn't bring a political solution. And he was quick to say, "My kingdom is not of this world." Wow. You see, we're just pilgrims here too. We're only passing through. You remember that old song? I'm only passing through. My treasure's laid up somewhere beyond the blue. Heaven is my home. We're citizens of glory and not citizens of this world. At least we're not supposed to be. And Jesus was continually reminding his disciples and those that were listening to him about this truth. And the more he suffered, the greater his capacity was to show his kingly reign. His kingdom was not here after all. It was what was next. I want you to turn to chapter 8, and then we're going to start with verse 22. And if you've got your Bible, we'll read that together. If you've got an app that you can read this on, that'll be great. And I think we've got some good guys up there that are putting it up on the screen. Thank you so much. Reading from Mark 8:22. and we're going to go down to verse 30. Let's stand together as we read God's word. We respect this word, and we want to make sure that all of our brain cells are focusing here. And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. And he, Jesus, took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on them, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" And he looked up and said, "I see people, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, "Do not even enter the village." And Jesus went on with his disciples to the village of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they told him, "John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and others say one of the prophets." And he, Jesus, asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Christ," which means the Messiah. And he strictly charged them to tell no one about him. Father, I pray that this morning you will open our spiritual eyes. May we see your truth in ways that we've never experienced before. May we humbly submit to your guidance, your leading, and ultimately, Lord, our submission will be for you only. In Jesus' name, amen. You can be seated. So all throughout the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we see instances of Jesus doing divine acts of healing. Some of his miraculous accounts are recorded for us several times in multiple Gospels, told from different vantage points in different people's lives and in those different Gospels. Yet there are other miracles that are recorded for us only once, unique to the Gospel which contains it. Within the Gospel of Mark, we find one of these unique miracles recorded in detail. And that's referring to this miracle that's right here, starting in verse 22. The account of Jesus healing this blind man outside the village of Bethsaida is not only rare, so to speak, because it's only written about once, but it's also the only, listen to this, progressive miracle that Jesus performed in the whole New Testament. We're going to explore this miracle by examining each verse in this passage in Mark 8, which contains this account. And just for our own geographical, inquisitive selves, Bethsaida was a village, a town that we've heard of before, and it was located near the mouth of the upper Jordan River, up there at the top on the east bank of the Sea of Galilee. This village is no longer inhabited. In fact, it really doesn't exist anymore in modern day Israel. But recently, archaeologists have discovered its ruins, and they verified that it did indeed exist at the time of Christ. Isn't it amazing? As they dig up these things over in the Holy Land, they keep finding more and more evidence, more and more proof that everything in this book is absolutely true. Every archaeological dig just backs the scripture even more. And I love that because It's not that we need to have any more backing, but I love the fact that we have these assurances and we know that these things actually did happen. This is not a fairy tale. This is not some sort of a fantasy book. This is real and it's factual, and the evidence on the ground supports it. And I love this passage where Jesus is once again visiting this little village of Bethsaida for many, many reasons. It's not remarkable. It doesn't even exist today. But he visited this village, a little tiny town that he chose to care about and care about its people. And he was welcomed with huge excitement by the people as they longed to see some of his great miracles. The people may not have known or believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Maybe it hadn't really hit them yet, but they would have heard of his great miracles, and they were more than willing to come out to experience all of the fantastic things that Jesus could do. So yesterday, we went and experienced something that was awesome. And it's just one more proof of how events and all kinds of, promotion and, the fun and all of the excitement having to do with a fair will attract people. You get some exciting things going on and get people involved, and they want to go. And we went to the Darke County Fair, and we took our grandchildren over there, and we just had a ball. It was great. And I was struck at how totally hot and sweltering it was, yet how the people came out in droves. I mean, the place was packed on a Saturday. Probably, people in that party that are in control in the government right now would have said that yesterday we were part of a super spreader event. Well, we were busy spreading the joy and having lots of fun, and we weren't worried about that other stuff because we know that Jesus takes care of us, and we were so busy having fun, I don't think anybody really even cared. And I was struck again with the fact that you just put up the rides and start to put on the show, and you have some good food and all these things, and the crowds come by the tens of thousands. Can you imagine the miracles of Jesus and the things that he did, the food that he provided? And remember, Jesus the chef, the DoorDash operator out in the desert, provided more than 4,000 meals and more than 5,000 at another occasion. He knew how to really please the people, how to satisfy folks, and they came by the tens of thousands. Well, so he comes to Bethsaida, and he's continuing this time of ministering to Gentiles, ministering to everybody who comes, and just like the most exotic, awesome county fair in the whole world, the people gathered and they wanted to see what this man would do. I don't think that they really even connected with the fact that this was Jesus the Messiah. This was Jesus who was God. This was the Son of God. But they came to see all of the magnificent things that they could see. People really haven't changed much, have they? I don't think they were focused on the reality of what Jesus could bring, but very quickly they were reminded that Jesus is the reigning king, and he accomplishes great miracles. So in verse 22, they came to Bethsaida, and some people, these were the fairgoers, the people who were there to see all the spectacle. Some people brought to Jesus a blind man, and they begged him to touch him. These were people who were convinced that Jesus could do amazing things. They weren't probably convinced that he was God, but they knew he could do something awesome. And this blind man was someone that they knew well. I don't know anything at all about the relationship that this blind man had with these people who brought him. I don't know whether he was a fixture in the community. Everybody knew that he was blind. Maybe he was in the village begging for money, some way to support himself. Somehow, all the people in Bethsaida knew this blind man needed help. And they all knew that Jesus specialized in this kind of help. Now, this is another thing that I love about the message of Jesus Christ and the amazing things he does. You know, we sing that praise chorus, "You are great, you do miracles so great. There is no one else like you, Jesus." Well, we know that. And I know that it's brought some people to First Grace because they've heard how God has miraculously touched some folks, and they've had miraculous healing, they've been delivered, they have turned over a new leaf, they've got a transformed life. They were out in the parking lot smashing vapes and smoking paraphernalia. They see all kinds of things, and they say, "Hey, I'm going to First Grace because I want some of that." Well, there are some folks in this account that knew that if they got to Jesus, maybe they could get some of the miracle touch that he had so often manifested. The blind man was helpless to get to Jesus on his own because he couldn't see. These people were dedicated to him, and they brought him. And we don't know about their relationship, but we know they were dedicated enough to bring him to Jesus. Now that's a real friend, isn't it? Somebody who says, "Hey, I know that if you came to Jesus, you could have a miraculous change in your life. Jesus could bring the most amazing things to your life." And a real friend is known by the fact that they will bring people to Jesus. They will bring people to a place where they can meet Jesus and come into relationship with him, and that he can do all kinds of amazing miracles. Yes, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The same Jesus that did this kind of miracle is available today to give you a miracle if you need it. And it can be a miracle on any level. It might be a physical healing. It might be a relational healing. It might be release from depression. It might be release from all kinds of bondage that you've got going on in your life, like we saw last week. Jesus still does miracles. These people in Bethsaida knew that that was true, and they just couldn't wait to get this man to Jesus. I'm sure that the blind man had tried everything. And when I think about this, and Becky, it's not because you were blind, but you did have some problems with your eyes. And I remember praying. And I remember that there was blurriness, and I remember that there was fuzziness, and that you had gone over to Columbus a lot, to specialists and people that were dealing with things with your eyes. And there wasn't real breakthrough until somebody got busy praying. Oh man, that'll testify right there. Because Jesus has got the capacity to bring on the healing. And sometimes we learn in the process of being shaped by difficult circumstances. There's nothing like blindness to make you dependent. Now the question is, who are we going to depend on? Thankfully, these people knew to bring this man to Jesus. It reminds me of a passage that Paul penned in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9, where he said, "My grace is sufficient for you. This is what Jesus said to Paul. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Are you hearing this today? God's power is perfected in your life when you're weak. Not when you're strong, not when you think you've got all the answers, not when you think, wow, I can handle anything on my own. That's not when God's power is perfected. It's when you're at your weakest moment. His power is made perfect. And he goes on to say, therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I'm content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And we could add parenthetically at the end, because of Jesus' power. That's why I'm strong. Now, I know that this verse is for somebody, a whole bunch of somebodies who are here today. Listen to that list. I'm content with weakness, insults. Have you been insulted this week? Have you had a rough time at work? Has somebody dissed on you? Somebody, disrespected you? Hardships, not being able to make it, having difficulty to do things, hardship, and persecution, and even calamity. And when we talk about calamity, I think of floods and tornadoes and all these things that are going on in our world and have happened even right here in the Miami Valley. And the Apostle Paul was saying, in all of these things, I'm content because when I'm weakest, I need him more. Hallelujah. Somebody getting this? Come on, tell me about it. When I'm my weakest, I need him more. I'm weak and he's strong. So number one, if you've got something you can write with, we've been talking here about confidence in Jesus' power. Confidence in Jesus' power. And we've got to build our confidence in his power and not our own strength. Come on, some of you have gotten to the place where I know that you've been discouraged. You've been depressed. You got to know that this blind man was. He tried everything. He was being led around just to get to the simple necessities of life. And finally, somebody led him straight to the source of what he needed, who was Jesus. I know that there are some of you who have wandered around. You don't feel strong. You felt depressed. You have felt isolated. Throughout this last year, I know that there have been more teen suicides than ever before because our young people have been prohibited from normal school involvement and normal social involvement, and all of a sudden they lose hope and they feel like there's nobody in the world except me and I'm all alone. Nobody should be in that situation. And the reason we shouldn't be is because Jesus said, hey, my strength can be perfected in your weak times, in your alone times, when you feel like there's nobody that understands. And why is that? It's because we have confidence in Jesus' power, not our own. Your own power will fade. You might feel powerful for a moment or two, but your own power eventually will fade. The things of this life are temporal. They're fleeting. I had a funeral on Friday and had the privilege of being with Phil Persinger's family up in Piqua for his mom's memorial. And there's nothing like a memorial service and the mood that's there as you reflect on how fleeting life is, to remind you that what we have in Jesus is so precious because he never leaves us or forsakes us. He never hangs us out to dry. We are never alone. We're never defeated. We're never isolated because he is part of everything that we have. Confidence in him. Number 2 is care and compassion from Jesus. Care and compassion with Jesus. Now, as we look at the next verse, in Mark 8 and verse 23, we see that Jesus is ramping up here for a really special moment. This miracle was going to be unlike other miracles. This miracle was going to have his amazing, compassionate touch and care all over it. He was going to care for this man who obviously had been abandoned on a lot of levels, had been searching, maybe did not have huge, overwhelming faith yet. And he was going to lovingly lead him and shepherd him into this miraculous experience. Care and compassion are what Jesus exudes on every level. Nobody understands like Jesus does. Nobody cares like Jesus does. Oh, you have to put your trust and your faith in that, but nobody cares like him. He's always, always, always got what you need. And in verse 23, Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Now just get this. Understand this. This was our precious Jesus doing what he's able to do in such a miraculous, awesome way. He wasn't going to embarrass this man. He wasn't going to do something that was going to be a grandstanding play. He just lovingly took this blind man by the hand, and they walked out of the village, away from the crowds, to a place of solitude. And when Jesus, had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" I'm struck here by the care and compassion from Jesus. You'll never experience as great a compassion as you'll find in Jesus. It's like to be isolated. He hung on the cross and he said, "Father, forgive them," even as God turned his back. And Jesus said, "Why have you forsaken me?" He suffered and died alone for us. Oh man, he understands. He gets what you're facing. He knows what you feel. And you know, feelings can be a little bit misleading at times, and sometimes our emotions will lead us down a wrong path. But even still, Jesus knows what you feel. And he did make us emotional after all. He knows what you feel, and he cares about that. He took this blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Got to think that as they were sharing with these teens and young adults down at Victory Camp, one of the things that they were really ingraining in these young people is the fact that they need to get up in the morning and get away, get kind of separated and get some alone time with Jesus. They call it quiet time. They call it, a daily time with the Lord, whatever you want to call it, however you want to package it. It's time away, just you and Jesus. Why do they do that? Because that's when the power is released. That's when you get to know who Jesus really is. That's when you have that intimacy with Jesus, like the old hymn says, and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me that I'm his own. When does that happen? When you've got a quiet moment with him. And the blind man had a quiet moment with Jesus, and the next thing that happened was the power of God came down. It's an encouragement, it ought to be, to all of us. Value these quiet moments when you can just get away from distractions. And there are so many things, aren't there? Things that distract us all the time. Turn off your phone. I'm not telling you right now, but, turn off your phone sometimes and get some alone time with Jesus. Turn off the TV. Get some alone time with Jesus. Don't be consumed with every sport that comes on the TV or everything that you could be involved in. Get some alone time with Jesus, because that's where power comes from. And Jesus was just as caring and compassionate as he could be, and he wasn't hitting anybody over the head. He just lovingly took the man by the hand and led him to a place where he could experience what Jesus had for him. Many scholars have conjectured about why Jesus spit in his eyes. For us today, this is like, an insult. You would think, well, that would be an insulting thing to do. If I spit in somebody's eye today, they'd probably punch me in the nose. Well, I could see why they maybe would. But this culture was different. We know in the Greek culture, even to this day, and I don't know if you've ever seen, my big fat Greek wedding, and you've seen one of the weddings where the bride is coming down the aisle and all the people who are there are on her veil, because it's good luck. All kinds of weird customs are out there. But in this situation, and I don't know what it said culturally, but it's an amazing thing that Jesus used his own saliva to touch this man's eyes right out of the box. Some people have conjectured that it was a warmth and a kind of a balm with his saliva that would ease the man's pain. If so, that would certainly go with the care and compassion that Jesus shows and would have shown in this situation. I thought to myself this week as I was studying this and understanding that this was saliva, and I realized that when they test us for COVID right now, one of the things that they want is a saliva swab, right? They reach down your throat and they do some sort of a swab of your saliva. Many, many tests to get a saliva sample. Why is that? Because your DNA is in that saliva. Think about this in this context. The very DNA of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was applied to the blind man's eyes. Whew. That'll be some powerful DNA. However you want to interpret this, many have extrapolated lots of ideas about what this was. But then Jesus laid his hands on him, and then he asked him, "Do you see anything?" This is kind of a loaded question, because I'm sure that the blind man immediately interpreted that, "Do you see anything physically?" I think Jesus was also saying, in a spiritual way, do you have enough faith to grasp what's about to happen? Do you have eyes of faith that are open to see what I'm about to do? Can you believe with all that is within you, that I can heal you and that you can be completely delivered from the bondage of blindness. Well, the man partially was there, and maybe his faith was beginning to grow as he saw a few things, and he begins to talk about some of the things that he's seeing. But you know, the thing about this is this miracle was progressive, and I think that one of the reasons it's the only time that we see this kind of a progressive miracle where Jesus begins this process and then eventually it culminates with a complete and full restoration of the man's eyes is because the man's faith needed to grow to a place where he could receive everything that Jesus had for him. I think that maybe that's the picture of a lot of us today. We'll come to church, and yes, we might be willing to believe a whole bunch of stuff. But maybe our faith needs to grow so that we can experience the full victory and restoration that God wants. You say, well, I just don't know that I could do that. Well, I'll just tell you from the Word of God that without faith, it's impossible to please Him. Without faith. With faith, all things are possible. God can do anything. He's ready to touch you. He's ready to pour out from heaven on you, and it comes by faith. We have to embrace all that Jesus wants to do and bring to us, and then we can receive. Wow. It starts with salvation, but then there are so many other things. Wow, and this is so great. And another place, Jesus expressed his compassion. And we've been in Mark for a number of months here, in Mark chapter 6. A few weeks ago, we read in verse 34 that when Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd and he had compassion on them. Why did Jesus want this process to ramp up the man's faith? Because he was full of compassion. Friend, today, he wants you to grow. He loves you just the way you are, but he loves you too much to let you stay that way. Don't stay that way. Grow in what God has for you. Grow in faith and capacity to trust him and to believe him for big things. Then just earlier on in Mark chapter 8, when he was feeding the 4,000, one of the reasons that Jesus broke the bread, and we say that 4,000 men, but women and children on top of that, maybe 15,000 people were fed because Jesus said, I have compassion on this crowd because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. So you might question me today and say, Pastor, do you know that Jesus really sees my need? Yeah, he does. He sees your need. He knows your name. He knows where you live. He knows your email. He's got all of your data. You know, and it's not because of any kind of a data breach or any kind of hacker. It's just because he knows everything and he loves you. Your information is safe with him, but let me tell you, he knows you. He wants you. He loves you. And this is the story of what happened to the blind man. Number 3 is Christ's completed healing. Christ's completed healing work. And this is amazing. In verse 24, we see Christ completing this progressive miracle. It started off with his saliva, his spit on the man's eyes. He laid his hands on him. He asked him if he was seeing anything yet. And then he goes on to say, he looked up and said, I see people, but they look like trees walking. Then Jesus knew that his faith was about to elevate. He laid his hands on his eyes again. And the man opened his eyes. his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Well, somebody ought to say an amen right there. Everything clearly. Everything was restored. As the man ramped up his faith, as he looked into the face of Jesus and trusted him for a miracle, immediately his eyes physically could see Jesus. Oh, I'm seeing here that before his physical eyes could see Jesus, his spiritual eyes saw Jesus. He came to the place where he could trust and know that Jesus was who he said he was, that he was the Son of God, and that he could do it. He could make a miracle happen. And that's exactly what Jesus did. Wow. I remember another story where Jesus used his saliva on a blind man's eyes. Do you remember this story in John chapter 9, verse 5? The blind man by the pool of Siloam, as long as I am in the world, I'm the light of the world, Jesus said. And having said those things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. An act of faith on that man's part to go and wash. And the word Siloam in the Greek there, it means sent. Jesus sent him with an act of faith to accomplish. And the man went and washed and came back seeing. Complete restoration. Don't tell me that Jesus can't do things. Don't tell me that Jesus can't find a solution for the United States of America right now. Don't tell me that Jesus doesn't have an answer for your life, or that he can't do anything for your family, or you've tried everything and you've been to every doctor. Don't tell me those things, because the same Jesus in this passage is the same Jesus we can trust right now. Trust him, though. Have faith. Philippians 1, verse 6 says that I'm sure of this, that he who's begun a good work in you will bring it to completion on the day of Jesus Christ. Hey, we may have a progressive kind of a healing as our faith responds to Jesus. Our faith may grow, and the more our faith grows, the more we'll receive from the Lord. And you heard me kind of single out Becky back there with her eyes. I've seen the progression as she came to greater and greater faith. You know, her sister, Barb Schilling, brought her to church, and I got to meet her and find out what a wonderful person she was. And it wasn't but just a month or two after that we started seeing God at work, not only in her spiritual life, but in her physical life. Healing eyes that haven't been what they should have been. And God is able today. I want somebody to get hold of this and trust the fact that God is able. Number 4, this is what will convince you of that he is able. Clear vision of Jesus, the Son of God. When you're faced with who Jesus is, you're not going to let anything stand in the way. When you're faced with who Jesus is, who is Jesus? Oh, he's that one that I was just talking about, the one who is able. He's the one who provides. He's the one who never leaves us or forsakes us. Yeah, and we know that he was in his earthly ministry as he did this miracle at Bethsaida. But yes, he is also God. Jesus, the God of the universe. And that's why healing is no problem, especially when it comes to creating seeing eyes out of nothing, because he is and was the creator of everything. He creates for the fun of it, for the joy of it, to bless our lives. He is the author and the creator of the family. And next week we're going to talk a lot more about this. But Jesus intended for us to be blessed by what he's created in the family on this earth. Because one day we're going to live in a family relationship in heaven with him forever. And some of you might say, well, Pastor, my family's not so much heaven. Well, maybe you need one of those progressive miracles, and you need to stand in faith for your family. See them grow in faith. See them grow in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord Jesus. See them grow in their knowledge of who they are in Christ and what Christ can do through them if they're devoted and submitted to him. A clear vision of Jesus, the Son of God, is what's necessary. And so here's the final verses in number 26 and 30. He sent him to his home, this blind man. Jesus said, do not even enter the village. So you might guess as to why Jesus said that, but he wanted the blind man to really fully assimilate what had just happened to him, that he had an encounter with the Son of God, that his eyes, which had been completely blind, were now completely restored. He didn't want him to go back into the village and get all distracted, hear all kinds of, questions and all kinds of theories about why this might have happened or anything like that. He wanted him to stay in a state of faith. And he said, don't even go back into the village. So often we tell our young people, after they've come to faith in Jesus Christ and they've seen their life transformed, and we're saying, okay, you've had this high at Victory Camp this summer. Now, don't go back to your old life. Get yourself some new friends, somebody who trusts and loves and walks with Jesus. Don't go back to your old life. Don't go back to that village where everything polluted your mind, where you were distracted, where there was no focus on Jesus and everything else had to have priority. Jesus told the same thing to this blind man. Isn't that amazing? Don't go back to the village. Don't enter it. And Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way, he asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? Why did Jesus ask his disciples that, do you think? Was Jesus having an identity crisis that he didn't know who he was? Why was he asking the disciples, do you think? No, Jesus had no identity crisis. He totally knew who he was, and he was operating in his gifting. He knew exactly what his mission was, but he wanted to know what the disciples were thinking. What was their level of faith? Were they still in blindness, where they saw the miracle feeding of 4,000 and 5,000 and all these things where blind eyes were healed and people were delivered of demonic possession and all of these things? Were they still in blindness and not knowing who he was? He just had to know, because he wanted their confession to make a difference in their life. He didn't need to know who he was, but the disciples needed to. So they told him, John the Baptist? And they said, well, and others say Elijah, thinking that for the Son of God, that was going to be some honor that they would call him Elijah. And others, one of the prophets. Jesus probably in his own mind had so many things he could have said. Like, you compare me to John the Baptist, my cousin? Is that what you're talking about? And you're talking about Elijah and those prophets? You mean those other guys that I created? See, Jesus was not ambivalent about who he was. There was no question in his mind who he was and what his mission was, but the disciples still had not gotten to the place where they fully knew. Except Peter. Oh yeah, Peter, that guy that so many of us really relate to, the man with the shoe-shaped mouth, always sticking his foot in his mouth, always bursting out with something that was embarrassing and showing that he was ignorant and he really didn't know what he was talking about. Yet Peter became the disciple with his boldness who led the first church of Jesus Christ. Because that boldness and that faith that rose up in him was the thing that Jesus could use. Oh yeah, and at this moment he rose up in faith, and Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." In other words, you are Messiah, God. And then Jesus strictly charged them to tell no one about him. You see, he wasn't ready for people to just throng him and to expect some other outcome than the one that he had engineered specifically from time and eternity past. He wanted to hear what Peter thought, and today he wants to hear what you think. And you will not have victory in your home. You will not have victory in your personal life. You will not have victory in any realm of your life on this earth until you face this question: who is Jesus? And are you ready to place your faith in him? The answer is that Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is the Savior. Jesus offers forgiveness. Jesus offers you unconditional love. Jesus offers you an abundant life now and in eternity. He offers you all kinds of salvation and deliverance and all these things that he gave. He can give you that. But who do you say that he is? If you don't make it personal, then you don't get any of that. And I know that there are a bunch of church people that have been so faithful to go to church, and maybe you've even dedicated your life to ministry, and you've not settled this question. Because if Jesus is not Lord of all in your life, he's not Lord at all. Do you understand that? He says, if you confess me before men, I'll confess you before my Father in heaven. And we know that Romans 10:9 and 10 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. In other words, you enter into that 24/7 relationship, that marriage with Jesus. Then salvation occurs. Many of us today need to search our hearts and say, what is this about? How could I receive the kind of miracle? Why don't I receive these kinds of things? I love to hear these stories. I love to hear these accounts of all the things that people receive from Jesus. Why don't I receive that? And I hear from people all the time, we just don't see many miracles in America anymore. Well, guess why? We don't trust that Jesus is the Savior. It starts there. If he can save your soul, there's no end to what he can save. When the Bible says he's able to save to the uttermost, that means he can save everything about you. Your physical health now, he can save your spiritual health, your relationships, all the things that you struggle with, there is an answer, because Jesus, in addition to being the creator of the universe, is a healing Jesus. The great physician, the great provider, all that you need today is found in him. And today, Matthew 16, verse 16, reiterates this passage where Simon Peter responded to Jesus. And he said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter," which means rock. And that word rock and the word Peter, the name Peter, had great resemblance in that language. Petros. And he said, "You are Peter, and on this rock, the rock of his faith, the rock of your faith today," Jesus said, "I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." All I can say is, whoo! I just want some of that. I just want some of that. I want that. Some gates of hell storming power. And it comes by faith. Faith and trust that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is Savior and Lord. Friend, today, if you can get hold of that, there is no end to what you can do. You'll do it in his power, but there will be no end to what he can do through you. Friends, today, if we can get hold of this, there is no end to the ministry that can come out of First Grace. There is no end. Listen, I'm just believing what is here. And there is no end to what we can take on and accomplish in the name and the power of Jesus. Because the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is available to us, and we appropriate it by faith, and we storm the gates of hell. Yes. We're not going to allow evil to take over. We're not going to allow evil and all kinds of evil agenda and all kinds of junk to dominate, even in our own country. We have something to say about that because we are the hands and feet of Jesus in this world. And it's time for us to storm the gates of hell instead of apathetically lying back and saying, "Oh, we're all going to die." Wrong answer. We storm the gates of hell, and Jesus is victorious through us. So, the question remains, though, for you and for me, who do you say that he is? Yeah, you're all ready to get charged up when you hear me talk that way. But I want to hear you talk that way. I want you to rise up in the power of what Jesus says is yours today. It comes by faith. Somebody in this place needs a healing. And you'll receive it if you have faith. If you'll rise up in the faith and the power that Jesus said is yours. You can do it. Somebody needs to believe God for some things in their family today. And, oh yeah, we're going to revisit this again next week, but somebody needs to believe God for some things in their family. You have settled for an apathetic existence. Maybe in your marriage, you're two ships that pass in the night. Maybe in relationships, you have blown it with your kids. Welcome to the difficulties and tribulations of life. And friends, we all make mistakes. There's no condemnation, according to Romans 8, verse 1, to those who are in Christ Jesus. But so many of us live in condemnation, even though we're delivered from it. And Jesus is just saying, where are you going to go from here? Who do you say that I am? In other words, what kind of power do you think I've got? Do you not know that I'm the creator of the universe? That there's nothing that's too hard for me? Do you not know that this power is available to you? Do you not know that I won the victory for you on the cross? Do you not know that you can be raised to newness of life because I got up out of the grave and I live forevermore? Do you not know these things? Come on, somebody, grab hold of this and trust him. 'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus. Just to take him at his word and to rest upon his promise, and just to know he said it. He said it. He's worthy of trusting. Let's bow our heads together and pray.